Traditionally, in my game, in greenfields and large-scale land subdivisions, I think 95% of dwellings are 4-bedroom, 2-living, 2-car garages. We're not delivering enough diversity. It's something we're working on really hard. That ties back to affordability. But maybe just an easy one to kick things off. If you could each sort of give me very quickly, what would have been some of the stumbling blocks, in experiences. I noticed with yours, Paul, it had been a fair while. I think you said you started in 2006. So time is a pressure on all developers. So maybe some of the stumbling blocks that you've experienced and how the audience could sort of learn from that.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. So at Mullen Creek, I shouldn't be speaking on behalf of the developers, but yeah, you're exactly right. They did have a real issue with the project running too slowly, and that could be any number of authorities and local governments and different departments in local government that not only made it a struggle to get the project going, like to get planning approval, but then the various departments within a local government, so there'd be a CEO who was, when planning approval was finally got, there was a CEO in Manningham who was very keen on the project, but the departments often struggled with tackling new ways of doing things, whether it was with regard to, landscape and streetscapes, or whether it was to do with infrastructure and, servicing the estate. So yeah, that was really important for that to work well. But the relationship between the council and the developer needed to be critical, and I think it got better over time. It was never a disaster or anything like that, but it became more and more functional and ran quite smoothly when each home had to get planning approval.
Yeah.
And so that was quite a thing when we had to kind of almost preempt what the planning department would want, but to get all those good environmental outcomes out of what we were reviewing in the design process and then overseeing.
But Paul, it felt like council standards are here and you were striving for this and pushing for that. So
why was that?
Why was it so hard?
So really, that's a really good question. The Mullen Creek project was developed by 3 siblings, so they're called the Matthews family, Steve, Sue and Danny, and they are environmental philanthropists. So they really kind of had a vision from way back, even from their parents' day. Their parents did, who'd lived on that land. It was their own home. So they had a real emotional and a deep kind of ethical interest in that project, and they never actually swayed from it. Yeah. And that was a tremendous thing. And I mean, Rafi pointed it out again last night. The project, all of what we learned, they've been desperate to share with whoever. There's a huge amount of stuff on the Mullen Creek website about the project, whether it's about materials or that stuff about all the things I spoke about, and many more because I had to cut lots of things out. But all of that stuff's readily available. So they were really wanting not just to create a good exemplar there, but also to create this knowledge base that everyone could work with and choose from. There might be some parts that attract you more than other as a new developer, but you could run with those things, and we were paid to create all those info sheets and do all that work, which I'm really grateful for that we could do that. Normally that stuff gets done by volunteers or people who have some passion, but it was tremendous. So very, very grateful.
I think
to that
Joseph
family.
touched on it, legacy. I think if you're not here tonight, you're not here about continual improvement and wanting to leave a better legacy. Brad, your experience, some of your challenges, maybe around even certification and compliance, like.
Don't start me on that one. I think our biggest challenge as a builder is knowledge and sophistication in the consumer space. I think we sort of picked up on the theme and heard across the speakers tonight that there is a drive, there is an interest in community, etc. The problem is at the moment you've really only got thought leaders. There's not a lot of this happening around, particularly not in the volume space. And I mean, you know, from an Integra perspective, you would understand that. Like our Ballarat display home is in Nick's development site. And you know, Integra were great and unique for us as a large scale greenfields developer for doing what we needed to do. Basically, what Integra did was didn't get in our way, which is fantastic. But the biggest problem that we encounter is consumers come through the door and they are aesthetic sensitive, price sensitive, and then sensitive to the ergonomic requirements of the home in relation to how they want to occupy. And having started this exercise in 2019, for us, you know, we've got 35 odd staff in our head office, and while they're all fervent green builders now, sustainability focused builders now, boy, it's been a long journey to educate and get everybody up to scratch, so then we can actually go out and talk to clients or pending clients and actually put it to them that this is what can be done. And then, of course, have them not sit there and go, Christ, how much is that going to cost me? You know, and the standard one that always comes back in volume, and greenfields in particular, because we're about 60% greenfields, 40% knockdown rebuild, brown sites, is how much is square metre? It's the first bloody question every time. It's like, no, it's not what it's about. And particularly when we start to talk about net zero carbon, embodied carbon, etc., you can't look at it from that perspective. So that is simply our biggest impediment moving forward. And that's, you know, I made the cheeky or somewhat self-entitled comment of, you know, I put my money where my mouth is. That was more a strategic position because I and our executive realised that if we didn't invest first, it's not going to happen otherwise. And that's really, you know, what's got to happen.
Thanks, Brad. Nat or Joseph?
I'll go you.
It's good. Biggest challenge, probably two at the moment. One, attempting to sell apartments in a regional market is not easy. Trying to sort of be a pioneer, I guess, in some words, trying to convince people to come into a display suite and put a deposit down is not easy. But the market in Ballarat's been really good at responding to that, and I think building a brand and a journey and a legacy helps with that. The second is construction.
Rising building costs, you mean?
Rising building costs and builders working on low margins, and you're trying to, and the education piece around attempting to achieve higher star ratings and ensure that the builder, if they don't understand that, there's an unknown there, right? Like they've never built it before, but they don't understand what it costs. Have they priced that in effectively? And do we trust them? Do they trust us? Does the buyer trust us that we trust them? There's a whole circular sort of discussion point there. It's probably the biggest sort of challenges.
Yeah. Probably on behalf of the room, I would like to say you are a pioneer developer, and there is a lot of admiration in this room for what you are trying to do for this city, is reactivate the CBD, and that is not easy. We've got a gold mining legacy in this town, so buying sites is problematic. We've got heritage, all sorts of things. So from our point of view, taking on that infill, smaller apartments, it's exactly what the city is looking for, that diversity. So maybe we'll just go circle. Oh, sorry, Nat. Yeah, my fault.
It's probably very relevant because the challenges you face, City of Ballarat, Planning and Strategic Department are one of them probably. But for us, the challenge is for your greenfields, your subdivisions are at the mercy also, even though you have a precinct structure plan, they're at the mercy of external authorities as well. So we're dealing with Central Highlands Water, catchment management authorities, and then we're doing slight deviations to something that's generally in accordance with. And it's a challenge even in our development engineering team and resourcing. So I realise what you're up against when you're dealing with planning as well. Infill, it's policy and strategy that supports a developer who wants to do a Nightingale and wants to build high in a heritage overlay, where generally the perception is that anything that rises above 2 stories has an impact on our heritage. And we need to find that balance, and without good policy, that balance is hard to strive for. So I do realise the challenges that our developers face, just to try and be innovative and to bring along a product that, you know, we can all celebrate or have legacy to.
I think we had some excellent demonstration projects tonight, and I think the vision is to be more than that, is how do we scale? How do we scale these ideas? Paul, you gave some excellent examples for developers and for council. Brad, how do we scale, you know, with the volume and the demand that we're seeing, how do we scale this? Councillors doing their ESD policies and sustainable subdivision frameworks and...
Yeah, it's not council. Council are doing, out of the 3 tiers of government, council are actually far further advanced than state and federal. We were in Canberra a couple of weeks ago for the HIA Green Smart Awards, and the minister the deputy minister was there and gave the most absurd speech to a room full of builders that you guys are your thought leaders, your innovators, you're leading the market, the building industry is going great guns, 7 stars, not a problem, it's only going to cost you $5,000 to transition, blah, 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 bullshit. Like, it was just extraordinary. And the problem, I think that's the fundamental problem at the end of the day, because she also had the gall to say, well, industry should lead the way. Well, you guys nearly crippled the entire industry by releasing, during a pandemic, an economic stimulus of the home buyers grant of $25,000 a pop, which introduced a whole bunch of people that, let's be honest, shouldn't own property in the first place because they're not financially stable enough to do so. So where do we start? We've got to get the federal government and the state government aligned on policy. And sadly, I used to be involved in the Howard government on the bureaucratic side, and there were countless reports around housing affordability and affordable housing, which are 2 fundamentally different things back then. And we're talking 20 years ago. None of those strategies have been implemented, and that's now put us well behind the curve in relation to sustainable residential construction and development. And that's why we've got debate about, and I know I'm harsh on NatHERS, but NatHERS doesn't take into account resilience and internal health and well-being. So volatile organic compounds, VOCs, atmospheric conditions and atmospheric quality internally within a house. NatHERS doesn't take into account blower door tests with all these aspects. So we actually need a top-down approach first, in my mind. And then we need government to actually realise that we're so indentured to large-scale volume builders in this country and big-scale land developers as well, that they actually need support and assistance around red tape. So changing contract management, because contract management is absurd in this country. Fixed price contracts are an absolute waste of time. That's what's put most builders to the wall. Everyone from ProBuild all the way down, ConDev, all of them, all the way down to the little guys that are hitting the wall and will continue to do so for the next 18 months, is all about they've been unable to apply any flexibility on contract management with fixed price contracts. So I think we've got to start there. At the same time, I think it's industry's fundamental responsibility to educate the market. Yeah. It's going to take a long time.
Paul, you touched on it, and Joseph's delivering it. And I'll go there, the word affordability, and I think you'll hear it a lot coming up to the state election from probably both sides. But are we building too big houses? And we're now how are we looking at affordability? And I guess there is demand now for smaller houses, apartment living. I think that has tipped in Ballarat, and we're ready to go. And you talked about it in your speech.
Yeah, that's right. I think there's so much opportunity for presenting exactly what you said. Sorry, Nick. Just a whole lot more diversity in opportunities and industry and council. I would have thought building industry and local government could have a huge role in making those offerings. This morning I was driving around a bit to familiarise myself with the Western Growth Corridor, and I was in Lucas, and I saw this really interesting little development of these tiny little houses on tiny blocks, they're called downsizers from one group, and in Lucas, and then I only to learn and that it's for over 55s, for older people. And I'm thinking, those smaller as an option, they could be really wonderful, and shared pools rather than a pool per. Not that there's so many pools here, but at Mullum Creek there's so many pools it's ridiculous.
Yes.
And shared facilities for if you're having a big party, you might want to invite 30, 40 people, but that could be a shared community facility and gardens where they're productive or just places. So that whole thing about sort of the ownership and nothing. My housing solution is only inside my fence line is a very limited thing. So that demonstrating, I think, lots of other options. And when people see things and they can see some people living in it, doesn't matter how small that little estate, they go, now I get it. I'd like to live there.
Sure.
And so it needs a bit of courage and a lot of support from local government and banks too, like you were saying, the banks need to support these options, and that they are viable,
I think the latest census data showed like 35% of people living in Ballarat are actually single-person households living in 4 bedrooms with wasted space. So we talk a lot about invisible density and that, but Joseph, you're not doing invisible density. You're doing very much in our face, and it's working. It's a challenge though, and a risk. And
it goes to that different layer about that housing diversity. We have about 26 or 27,000 baby boomers that will very quickly be approaching the point in which they don't want to live in a 4-bedroom house by themselves or as a couple anymore. And at present, there's nowhere for them to go. It's an untapped market in our view. But we also have just a severe lack of housing diversity for many other demographics across the space. Like the baristas making your coffee in the morning, if they're single and under 25, they probably don't want to live in a house at the bottom of Delacombe. They probably want to live where they can walk or ride to work and be in Bakery Hill or Ballarat Central. But then it falls down to other layers. Housing affordability is in the rental affordability of a house. Does that need to be a 4-bedroom dwelling, or could that be a single bedroom apartment where they share a lot of amenity, they share a lot of facilities, and then down from that, social housing and affordable housing, as in people who cannot afford to buy a house but can afford to rent a house. And I think that's probably the biggest policy shift that will be coming in the next 5 years. I think we need to get ready for that at the moment. I mean, it's been mandatory in the UK for 20 odd years to produce 50% of your housing is affordable, and you'll get a single line transaction for 300 dwellings off a plan for £200 million, and that's it. You've got a housing affordability operator in there, and they choose the tenancy, and it's tenure blind, and you go from there. I think that's the next wave of affordable housing that will sort of approach our market.
I am mindful of the time, and I would actually like to throw to the floor now if anyone has questions.
You touched on, Nick, about upscaling. Do you all think that maybe sustainability has a little bit of a identity crisis? Has it become something that is perceived by the common person as unattainable, unachievable and unaffordable? And an elitist identity that is what we've portrayed it as in the marketplace. And to play devil's advocate, have we gone the wrong way with it, in that could we be trying to appeal to the broader demographic? I know everybody's thrown around that it's a bad thing that people now want a 4-bedroom or 148 square metre block in the Greenfield site. How can we adapt sustainability to that ideal, to that common man's perception of what their next step in their life is, as opposed to creating such an unattainable project that it only appeals to 5% of the population?
I think a couple of us spoke to that I think the industry as leaders and really is the most reactive or capable marketing machines in the room. In reality, it probably needs a rebrand, doesn't it? In reality, and I think the industry as leaders, from our perspective, has the ability to change that conversation and you know, make it attainable, or not even attainable, like a necessary, really. Brett?
Sorry, I could wax lyrical about this one. Having been in the advertising industry for a while as well, I think the fundamental problem, you're dead right. Sustainability is a dirty word, totally, because no one's actually defined the parameters of what that actually means. ESG, environmental, social, governance. Your presentation, Nat, had the SDGs up there, Sustainable Development Guidelines. I'm assuming that a few people here tonight will know what the 17 SDGs are. We spent 18 months as a builder designing our own ESG framework and our own charter to implement that into our business to roll it out over the next 10 to 15 years. And interestingly, when we walked that out into market, every other builder goes, "Oh, what?" So it's, what is it, environmental sustainability something? No, not at all. Go back and have a chat with the United Nations or read their website about what's going on. Fundamentally, I think it comes down to the fact that because regulators have been asleep at the wheel with this at a federal and a state level in particular. I mean, again, the local councils, particularly with this new coalition, the MAV coalition, this is groundbreaking stuff. They're ahead of the curve, which is fantastic. But federal and state government, because they're on a 3-year cycle, they don't really give a shit. The first year, you know, we know how politics works, etc. First year, they're celebrating. The second year, they're trying to catch up. The third year, they're just trying to get re-elected. So, of course, they're not paying attention to this stuff because this is long-term. This, you know, Paul's been in this game for 20 years. It takes 50 years to transition this sort of stuff. In the Northern Hemisphere, we're 20 years behind in Australia because the Northern Hemisphere have been doing this for 50 years. Double glaze, UPVC, all these building standards, etc. Yeah, they've been around for a long time. And then the consequence of that is you end up with where the money sits, and I've just seen this up close and personal with CBA, is if a large organisation can't get a fast ROI or a fast conversion factor off a positioning statement, then they'll kill it. And the CBA launched with Green Star, with the Green Building Council Australia 2 years ago, their Green Star base mortgage product, which came out at 1.89% for 5-year honeymoon period. It was an extraordinary product. Well, guess what? No builders are building Green Star. We're the only bloody builder in the country. They've got a Green Star product. We can't build them quickly enough anyway. So the CBA goes, bugger it, we'll just pull it. That's what's happened. And the problem with this, you know, constant circulation where people try it, it doesn't work because they don't get an immediate response, an immediate profit or commercial response from it. Because let's be honest, sustainability can't be about profit. I actually think everybody said that tonight. It's not about profit, and that's why it's a dirty term, and it hasn't been clearly defined, and it's not being led into market. But you know, this room, rooms like this, people like us have to change that. That's how we change it, and it comes down to education, and it takes time. So we've got to educate. We've got to educate industry, regulators, but we've ultimately got to educate the consumer, because now's the time for the consumer to actually vote with their feet and their wallet and say, well, you know, I want 7-star, not the government turn around and dictate it to industry, because the government don't know what the hell that means. Henley, as I quoted before, this whole concept around we'll save you 70%, bullshit. They don't save anything. They're just putting solar on the roof. There's no comprehension of no gas to those construction sites, those residential outcomes. And there's certainly no contribution to battery for storage. Well, that's actually what saves you money at the end of the day. It's well known. It was a 62%, I think, off standard 5 kilowatt on the roof. Will give you about 62% on a standard 4-bedroom house saving.
In terms of offset?
Yeah.
In terms of
Total, yeah.
No, a lot less.
Lot less. There you go. See, my understanding is 62%. So you need a battery. But no one's talking about that. And the builder doesn't want to stick the battery in there. Oh, it's too expensive. You know? Battery costs another 10 or 12 grand. But guess what? It solves the embodied carbon problem. like we were talking about, and helps take those properties to net zero. But no one's educating, no one's talking about that. That's the trick.
The higher the NatHERS or the Green Star rating, the more affordable the house is to live in. I think on average, I think the NCC quoted about $183 per annum less. Is that right? To go from 6-star to 7-star. I think we anticipated or estimated in the Nightingale building that your average electricity bill would be about, for a 2-bedroom apartment pre-inflation, pre-COVID, was about $16 a month, no gas bill, and that's to operate your dwelling. There is no heating unless you opt into the hydronic heatings with the hydronic panels. And that's run off a centralised heat pump, so that provides all the hot water for the building. I think those sorts of shared and central facilities and amenities, and the higher the NatHERS or the Green Star rating, the more affordable the housing is.
I think there's
what sort of air trans? Oh, sorry.
Well, sorry, Joseph. I think there's a component of supply. We're just not delivering any apartments, any 2-bedroom, one bedroom, 1-car garage product. Not enough. I suspect it's under 3%. So those people who are looking for affordable housing, it starts at the house lot. How do we do the density better though? Smaller house designs, that's with you guys out here. So it's a big supply issue that we're not really tackling as an industry together.
Might even come down to the bigger build, sort of the big build and state level initiatives that are happening. And I know that they're currently working on different variations in Ballarat, including knockdown and rebuild of suburbs. And it comes down to them building to the standard that we expect of them ourselves. And then we might be able to achieve these outcomes. So, yeah, but it's really about supply at the moment.
Michael, you had a comment?
A little crack at that, and it doesn't answer the entire question in relation to energy, certainly electricity. One of the failings of rooftop solar is it's been installed in isolation of any other rooftop solar network. So what we're starting to see, and I think really encouraged by some work we're doing in the federal government right now, is this notion of a decentralised energy network. We see it in community energy hubs in small places like Yakandanga, to a certain extent Hepburn. So I, as a low-income earner who cannot afford to put solar panels on my roof, buys locally generated solar energy from my neighbourhood. So this notion of embedded networks, this notion of community sharing of decentralised energy, I'm still paying for electricity, but it's a whole lot less, and I'm not having to put up the infrastructure costs of solar panels on my roof. I think the other part of the development piece of that is that just like insulation in the house, solar panels will become part of the bill. So it's not retrofitted, it's part of the bill and part of that cost. So that notion of community energy, I think, is that.
And how you share that, at a neighbourhood battery level or community mini grid, and then how do we share that commercially, industrial, residential? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll actually add to that. I think one of the biggest problems that we've got, and the elephant in the room with that sort of question, is the existing stock in market. 11.8 million homes around this country, and bugger all actually meet standard. None of them are going to hit even close to 7-star NatHERS standard, as much as I'm against NatHERS, but and that's a massive problem. So when you talk about housing affordability, i.e. access for lower socioeconomic stratas within community, that becomes a massive problem. So we need a concerted approach from federal and state governments to start with about how we're going to address the remediation of all that redundant stock. So is it knockdown rebuild? Which in my mind, and I'd be interested, Nick, in your opinion about this, because that is a wonderful stimulant to the economy as long as it's done in a socially equitable fashion where money doesn't just all disappear off to large-scale constructors and developers, etc. But I think that's the fundamental issue we've got to deal with. We've got another company in our group which is introducing new 3D printing technology using concrete, and all of our demand and all of our discussions at the moment are up and down the eastern seaboard with state governments around NDIS, social and public housing, because there is a current 32% shortage in availability stock already up and down the eastern seaboard. It's only going to get worse. So that's one side of the equation, but that doesn't solve the real problem, which is all that existing stock.
Yeah. just speaking to that issue about existing housing stock, I'd actually disagree with that quite vehemently, because if we multiply that out as a principle across all our cities and our built environments, we would sink the planet overnight, because we cannot knock down and rebuild. Even if we were able to recycle a huge proportion of the product, the embodied impacts in construction are so great, and we just cannot do that. We have to find ways, and there are ways to retrofit buildings and improve them to bring them to a really good energy standard. And also, it's just that challenge which, sorry I didn't catch your name, the reporter, but I think we're coming to a kind of a point now where there's an alignment of opportunities, but also alignment of problems in the world. So the thing about housing affordability is so tied up, if you're a renter and you're living in a really, really large house because that's the only option that's available to you, and you've got a whole of house heating system, gas system, where you've got to heat virtually the whole of the house just to keep you and maybe your kid or your partner warm, it's a crippling cost. So there needs to be this gathering of reducing the scale of what we need per occupant to live in, but quality, sharing some of the facilities that we want in our living environment, you mentioned too, like sharing an electricity grid. The distribution costs associated with a microgrid or a small decentralised grid are going to be so much less. The generating costs are going to be so much less. So a renter who can't afford to invest in that directly should be able to actually buy electricity from whoever the investors are at a much more affordable price than getting it from your lawn. And then of course all of this links in with environmental sustainability. So this issue around smaller scale means we're going to use less energy to heat and cool. We're not going to be using the energy that's embedded in the construction. It's going to be so much less. So that by definition is going to be more affordable. But we really do need to look at our existing housing stock. We have no other option, and builders will do really well if they can actually, some might decide just to go down that path, others might not, but just to target that exact challenge. And there are some really good things around, and the environmental impact attached with rejuvenating old houses that don't perform well, and making them maybe more flexible for a broader use or a different kind of household structures through different parts of life, accessibility for when people might become older and frailer or might have other disabilities. All those things we need to look at together, and education of the community around all these things, so that sustainability isn't just this thing for the greenies, or it's something that I can't relate to. That it now is something that we all have to relate to. We live on an incredibly finite planet now, so there's a huge amount to be done, and you've mentioned that many times.
Just to close things up then, I think the title of today's presentation is Building Better Homes for the Future. And Lee, you asked it, how are we going to ensure compliance with this when policies are lagging, or certification and things like that? But we're looking to you as industry leaders. We've been locked up for 3 years. We've been head down, bum up, very busy. We can do it. We've got demonstration projects here from 3 amazing developers, architects, consultants. So I put the challenge to you all that we should all be ensuring that our developments and projects, not just sustainable, but let's keep livability at our heart and socially and other things. So I'll throw back to Darren and thank the panel very much for the Q&A.